History remembers the booming voices, the leaders, the battles that shook the earth. But some stories whisper. Some stories hide beneath dust and silence. They are the stories not found in textbooks, the ones that unfold in the quiet spaces between grand events. While the world focused on the declarations of kings and the strategies of generals, a different kind of war was being fought. It was a war of survival, waged not on battlefields, but in the skeletal remains of bombed-out cities. A war fought by those who were smallest, most vulnerable, and most easily forgotten. The early 20th century was a storm waiting to break. Across Europe, tensions simmered as economies faltered and nationalism surged. Poverty was rising. Nations were trembling on the brink of conflict. And as the world braced for the inevitable clash of empires, in the shadows, millions of children were slipping through the cracks, disappearing from the world's attention. They became the unseen casualties before the first shot was even fired, lost to hunger, displacement, and neglect. This wasn't just a prelude to war. It was the beginning of their own silent struggle, a struggle that would redefine courage in a world consumed by chaos. When the bombs finally fell and cities crumbled, they were left behind. Nameless children, wandering destroyed landscapes, ghosts in their own hometowns. Until armies, on both sides, realized a dark and useful truth. Children could move through places adults never could. They were small enough to be unnoticed, nimble enough to navigate the labyrinth of ruins, and desperate enough to take on any risk. They became the orphan squads, unofficial, unrecorded, unprotected, yet they were absolutely essential. They carried messages, scouted enemy positions, and smuggled food and medicine. In a world stripped of its humanity, these children became the quiet, beating heart of both survival and resistance. One child stood at the center of this forgotten story. His name was Marek Kowalski, 12 years old, silent, yet he was the leader of 7 other children. A boy who had lost everything but his resolve. His diary, a small, worn-out notebook found decades later, became the only surviving record of their hidden world. In its pages, he didn't write about heroism or glory. He wrote about the cold, the hunger, and the fear. He wrote about the bond that held his small family of orphans together. One haunting entry, written in a child's careful script, simply said, "We return at night, but not always together." Their life was a constant negotiation with death. Food was rare. Warmth was even rarer. Every night was borrowed time. Marek's diary details their methods. They learned the patterns of patrols, the blind spots in sentry posts, and the rhythms of the occupied city. They scavenged for food in the debris of bombed-out bakeries and foraged for medicine in abandoned clinics. To the soldiers marching through the streets, they were just part of the rubble, invisible. But to the resistance, they were the difference between life and death. They were the couriers of hope, their small hands carrying messages that could turn the tide of a local skirmish or save a family from capture. Their childhood was sacrificed for a cause they understood in the most fundamental way, the chance to see another sunrise. Then came the final mission, January 14th, 1944. A brutal winter had locked the city in ice. A message needed delivering across the frozen district. It was a message of critical importance, containing information that could save hundreds of lives from an impending raid. Marek and his squad were the only ones who could make the journey. The night was a maelstrom of wind and snow, muffling all sound. They set out, 7 small figures against the vast, unforgiving white. Their footprints in the snow led to a collapsed tunnel, an old sewer line they used as a shortcut. And then, the trail just stopped. They vanished. No bodies were ever found. No witnesses ever came forward. There was only the howling wind and a profound, chilling silence. After the war, the world wanted to heal. It wanted to rebuild, to look forward, not backward into the darkest corners of its recent memory. The stories of the orphan squads were inconvenient, painful reminders of a complete societal failure. They were swallowed by the louder tragedies, their contributions erased from the official narratives. Textbooks were written, monuments were built, and victory was celebrated. But the silent, desperate war fought by children like Marek was forgotten, buried under the weight of a history that had no room for them. Their sacrifices were deemed too small, too unofficial, to be remembered. But history has a way of holding on to its secrets, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. In 1997, During a renovation project in Warsaw, workers pulled up the floorboards of a dilapidated pre-war building. Underneath, they found a small, rusted tin box. The air was still and heavy as they pried it open. Inside was Marek's diary, and tucked into the back cover was a single piece of paper with 7 signatures, 7 names. One truth. On the very last page, Marek had written a final plea, a message in a bottle cast into the ocean of time. Let someone, someday, find this. History is loud. It's filled with the sounds of marching armies, roaring crowds, and triumphant declarations. But some of its strongest and most resonant echoes come from the smallest voices, whispering to us from the shadows. These are the voices we must learn to listen for, the stories we must strive to uncover, because in their silence, we find the true cost of our past. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more forgotten stories, subscribe to Echoes of Time.